of how Saturday night started. And, we actually had to bribe 100 people and have them sign a little pledge card that they would show up for a year on Saturday night so we could get it going. And I had people coming to me and saying, as soon as that commitment's over, I'm going back to Sunday morning. And now I look at this and I think, my goodness, what God has done, and then knowing that we're going to have another service after this, it's truly remarkable to me. And I'm just overwhelmed at God's goodness. Anyhow, a little history there. I was out in the Chrysler Cathedral, friends, when we started Saturday night service, and I bet you that was 10 years ago. And now it's our most popular service. It's unbelievable. So, hallelujah. Enough of my reminiscing, huh? Matthew chapter 26 as we continue. What to do with Jesus. And tonight we want to talk about his strength of character. Now, I've often wondered what different attributes of the Lord's most compelled me towards him. You ever thought about that? What is it about Jesus that compels me towards him? It's a paradox, because the Lord's strength of character also manifests itself in how sensitive he was. I want you to think about that for a minute. Jesus had this incredible strength of character, and we're going to read about Gethsemane tonight, which I think is the crux of his personal strength and character. And there was never a situation that Jesus wasn't in that he could not masterfully handle it. I mean, if people need to be fed, he could break the bread and feed the people. If they need a little wine at a wedding, he could turn the water into wine. If demons needed to be casted out, he could cast out the demons. If somebody needed healing, he could touch them and they were healed. If somebody needed to be reproved, he could reprove them, whether that was somebody that was close to him or a group of people. When people would try to catch him off guard, he was still somebody that could answer them with dignity and grace without any kind of defensiveness. And I just read the Gospels and I just go, oh, man, if you could just be a little bit like Jesus. If you could just be like him. And yet there was this incredible sensitivity to people that he understood even lots of times what they were thinking without even them saying a word. And then would speak and address their heart issues. And you would watch people, and I mean, you would see, from every dimension of society, you would see people come to him. And he touched them with grace and dignity. It was just amazing to watch this man as he, kind of navigated the minefields of life and walked through it. And yet, when we come to this place of the crucifixion, we come to the place of Gethsemane, you start seeing something a little bit different about the Lord that you haven't seen before. And actually, friends, I think what I'm going to describe to you tonight is something that draws me, anyway, closer towards the Lord, because we start getting a glimpse of his humanity. It's one of the most difficult things in the world is to understand that Jesus was fully God and yet he was fully man. And when we see him in the Garden of Gethsemane, we see a glimpse into his humanity. And I think it is so intriguing in the context of, it's one of the things that draws us towards the Lord, because as human beings, we can actually identify with somebody that's going through a difficult time. Now think about this. Jesus has watched the crucifixion. He's watched people die this way. And as he's watching that, he's got to be thinking in his mind, buddy, that's what's coming for me. And now he knows that he's entered into that time of the Passover and that he is going to be the real Lamb of God. And he's beginning to think about, oh no. See, I've always said this, it's pretty easy to talk a big game, but it's another one to live it. Jesus came to the planet for this very purpose. And yet it seems to be that when he gets to the Gethsemane, he's going, wow, didn't know it was going to cost this much. Now, What I'm going to call that tonight is the cringe factor. I have gone through some things recently in my life, and it's amazing. I'm 55 years old, been in the ministry now 24 and a half years, and I'm just discovering this dimension of my life that's been true with me practically all my life, and it's called the cringe factor. You know what the cringe factor is? The cringe factor is when you hear someone else describe what they went through, whatever it might be, and it was painful as they were going through their ordeal, and you cringe. You know what I'm talking about? You go, oh, man, I never want to go through that. What I'm saying to you is this, friends. I have discovered recently that I've had that dynamic in my life, but I've never paid attention to it. And now I'm at a place in my life where I have to pay attention to the cringe factor. Because the cringe factor explains to my mind there is something that's really painful. Now, here's something that, and friends, I know I say this way too often, but big deal. Lots of times what people will do, now this is the revelation that's come to me. Lots of times what people will do over the cringe factor is go, it must not be God's will, so I shouldn't go through it. And I want you to know there was a huge cringe factor in Christ's life, but it was God's will to go through it. And when I talk to a society today that basically has built its values about what is comfort, it's hard for us to put into the same kind of sentence that God is saying, I want you to go through something that's very difficult, and think that He's still a loving God because of a cringe factor. Now, here's something else, friends, that just draws me towards the Lord, is to recognize that He's cringing at this particular time, understanding that He came to the planet to really give His life to do just exactly what He's called to do. But He says these words. And you talk about Jesus being a paradox. I mean, He's not an easy man to just figure out. But you talk about a paradox. He says to the Pharisees at one point, nobody takes my life. I give it freely. And as a matter of fact, my dad said I had the authority not to give it if I didn't want to. That's pretty amazing. As a matter of fact, he even says at one point with Peter, when Peter whacks off the guy's ear as they're coming out to get him, and here's the thing about Jesus. He takes the guy's ear and slaps it back on the side of his head, heals him, and he says, Peter, look, don't you know that at this moment, I could ask for 12 legions of angels and get me out of this whole mess. Now, I don't know about you, friends, but that makes it even more dramatic to me that he could have opted out, but he didn't. And there's something about that strength of character that you just go, God, I wished I had that. You know, and I think what Jesus is saying to us is this, friends. It's kind of like our message last week. This whole thing is built upon my power in you at those moments. And what we're going to look at this evening is that Jesus goes through a really difficult time, but instead of going through and saying, hey, I'm really the strong guy, He reveals His humanity to us and says, there's some things in life that are really tough, but you can get through it. You can get through it. And I think if there's any lesson that Christ really speaks to us, is there's going to be some real dips. There's going to be some real valleys that you go through. But like I said last week, the dimension of character that is revealed in our hearts, whether good or bad, and it's a win-win situation when we go through those, is that God says, I will be with you. I will strengthen you. I'll even correct some things that are going on in your life. You know, you can have a wonderful time at Disneyland, but not much character is built there. And God will take us through these times, and that's what we want to look at tonight, is why does this Jesus person and His strength of character attract us so much? Matthew chapter 26, verse 36. And Jesus went with His disciples to a place called Gethsemane. By the way, friends, this is a garden. And just for your information, it's nice to be in a place where you know where the presence of God is. And you've cultivated a place. And it's as his custom was. In another gospel it says. And he said to them, sit here while I go over there and pray. And he took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. And going a little further, he fell on his face, or with his face to the ground, and prayed, my Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. Could you men not keep watch with me for 1 hour? He asked Peter. Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the body is weak. He went away a second time and prayed, my Father, if it is possible for this cup to be taken away, unless I drink it, may your will be done. And when he came back again, he found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away once more and prayed the third time, saying the same thing. Let me just say this to you. There's something about the third time. There's something about praying something through the third time. I mean, you see it on the third day he arose. I mean, it's just repeatable in the scriptures over and over and over again. You know, he didn't get it done the first time. He didn't get it done the second time. Doesn't that give you hope about your prayer life? Third time, he finally gets it done. Then he returned to his disciples and said to them, are you sleeping and resting? Look, the hour is near and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer. If you have your little outline you want to follow along, just take a look at 5 characteristics of Christ that require contemplation. I think anything that makes us contemplate about the Lord is good. Draws us towards him. Number 1 is this, his ability to remain vulnerable. His ability to remain vulnerable. Listen to this in verse 38. Then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. You know what overwhelmed means? I know you don't, but I looked it up for you. It means to be overpowered both in thought and feeling. Ever been there? Ever been in a place where you just, man, this is one of the darkest valleys I've ever been in my life. Now notice this. He invites his closest friends. Now there's 12 guys, friends. Now we're talking about being vulnerable here. And there's 12 of them that he can pick from. Whatever his reasons are, he takes 3 guys. Peter, James, and John. And he says, guys, come with me. Now, I mean, Jesus, of anybody, did not have to be vulnerable. But he was at a place where he was overwhelmed, and he's saying, I need somebody to listen to me. I need somebody to pay attention to what I'm going through. Now, friends, let me just tell you something that will take place in your life. Number 1 is this. You will be that person that needs to be vulnerable. And let me tell you exactly what human nature is. It's not to be vulnerable. It's to say, I can do this on my own. When in fact you can't. And that whole idea about Jesus being vulnerable at this point and saying, look, guys, I am so overwhelmed. I don't know if I'm going to make it. See, to me, hiding that would not be endearing. But being open about it makes you want to know that person because you can identify with somebody that's in a dark cloud. See, one of the problems that we have in Christianity is this, is that we absolutely play games when we're in dark times. I mean, we foster it in the concept of, I'm okay, when in fact you're not okay. I mean, most of us tonight lied when we came into this place. The greeter said, how are you? And you said, fine, and you'd just been in a fight with your wife. Well, some of you were, not all of you, see. Now, here's the point that I really want to get across is this, and there's a teaching point that Jesus makes really clear to us. First of all is this. Those times when people want to be vulnerable come at special moments. They don't come just all the time. And that's why it has to be special people. That's why it had to be Peter, James, and John. Is that at some point, Jesus felt like I could entrust to them what I am going through. Now, here's the kicker to this. You can say anything you want about these three guys, whatever was going on in their life. But I can tell you the number one thing that Jesus was looking for, and you see if this isn't true in your own life, he was looking for somebody to be sensitive to what he was going through. And just being a pastor, and I've just watched this in my own life. When somebody really wants to be vulnerable, you know what I want to do? Not be there. Can any of you identify with that? And you will find out, friends, that somebody in your life will say, boy, I really need somebody to talk to. And lots of times what comes up in us is we try to gloss over that. We try to get around it. And you know why? Let me tell you one reason. It's uncomfortable for us. It's uncomfortable for us to hear from somebody else when they're going through something. And I don't know about you, but when Jesus says, I want to talk to you, there's something about that that just attracts me towards him because I know that place. And see, friends, if I went around the room tonight and say, do you know that place? Every one of us would raise our hand. Yeah, I know that place. Being vulnerable is attractive. Number two is this. His physical suffering was authentic. Verse 39, going a little further, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed. Now listen, friends, Jesus was not having a flair for the dramatic here. Something about him that as he was going through this, that the weight of what he was carrying, actually at one point Luke even says it puts him on his knees and then he fell to his face. Now I have watched this dynamic take place in people. And it goes something like this. When somebody gets really bad news, I was at the hospital one time when somebody in a family got really bad news about their loved one. And you know what their response to it was? They fainted. They absolutely fainted. Somebody had to grab them and take them, care of them, because the news was just overwhelming. That sometimes what you get in your life is just overwhelming. I think sometimes what I'm guilty of is reading this and not really allowing that full impact of what this moment is really like. And just kind of marching right on through it. I've watched people grasp like this. I've watched people actually go to their knees over the weight of what they've heard. You know, I've watched people in stunned silence try to gather in what was just said and not be able to really get a hold of what was just said. And you know what's amazing about this, friends, when you watch that kind of a dynamic? I mean, if you have an inkling of sensitivity in you at all, you know what you do? You go right towards that person. You go right towards them. Because you want to do something to help them. And there is something in that moment that everybody knows. Something big's going on here. And just to give you an illustration of exactly what I'm talking about, this will bring a lighter moment into the whole situation. It's getting a little quiet in here. Monday night, my son and I got to go to the Bronco football game. And it was, yeah, go Broncos. Boo Raiders. But that's a personal joke, and those of you that know who I'm talking to will understand. And Rod Smith caught a pass. And as soon as he caught the pass, the guy came around and hit him right in the helmet. And I mean, people, 75,000 people are cheering and everything else. And I mean to tell you, in 2 seconds, the whole place goes stone quiet. And you know what? All it is a response to how he fell. And everybody knew something happened. Something took place at that particular moment that just quieted everyone. And here's what my point is about this. Maybe at some point, you and I need to just stop and contemplate what's happening with Jesus. That's God on his face. Something has driven him to that place. Something has overwhelmed his heart so much that a physical, authentic manifestation of what is going on in his heart. And actually, friends, what happens to us lots of times is the outward manifestation that takes place in our physical form is an inward indication of what is happening in the heart. And there is something about Jesus being so authentic with his physical pain that's actually on the inside that draws us towards him just like it would towards somebody that got some really bad news. You're just drawn towards him. And then you realize it was all about us, you see. And something about his strength of character at this moment, saying, I'm going through with this, grabs you. Number 3 is this. He was conflicted by the humanity of his own will. Ever been there? He was conflicted by the humanity of his own will. Verse 39. My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. I think you'll agree with this statement. Sometimes doing God's will is not an easy thing to complete or to accomplish. 6 of us agree on that one. Here's Jesus being perfect in every way, yet he's in an intense moment of conflict about doing his will or his Father's will. I don't know about you, but I find myself there. I find myself, wow, God, I don't know. Those cringe moments that I was talking about? Some of those times that come and you just go, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this. Now, here's the thing that I really think that I think we need to get through, is that Jesus knows that he's got to do the Father's will. But there is and I want you to get a hold of this, friends. There is an intense wrestling match. There's an intense grappling that's going on between he and his Father. There's something that is being said, boy, Dad, if there's another way around this thing, I would really like to see that right about now. And he keeps going back. The third time, he keeps going back. Now, here's the point that I want you to get a hold of, and it goes something like this. I don't know that if you can surrender with something really quickly, if it really means that much to you. See, and God has this incredible ability, friends, to bring us to a crossroads in our life. And we know that we can go our way or we can go God's way. And the point of it is that we have to grapple with doing what God has called us to do. And when we grapple and we finally come to that place of surrender, then there is this kind of release that comes to us because we've really given up something that really mattered. And I think that is the sacrifice that God is looking for. I don't think that he expects us, friends, just to give it up lightly and then, go about our own way and saying, I did that in prayer, when in fact we know we really haven't settled the issue in our heart. But God will bring us to a place, and here's the amazing thing about it too, friends. Lots of times you and I will grapple over issues in our life and we'll come to that place and we'll make the wrong decision. Now, I don't mean this to be heavy at all. But I want us to understand that at this particular point, Jesus finally gets to the place when he gets to and saying, look at, Lord, not my will, but yours. And see, again, if I went around the room, it's the evening, isn't it? Went around the room and just saying, there's times in your life when you just go, boy, I don't want to do this. And probably every hand would go up. And yet, here's the kicker to it, friends. When you obey and you're on the other side of it, it's like it was the best thing in the world for me to do. See, and I think what our expectation is about God is that he doesn't expect us to grapple with him. As a matter of fact, I want to tell you this, and I think this is a word for somebody here tonight, and it goes something like this. I think what God is expecting from you is honesty as to where you are right now. Just being absolutely honest. One of the things that I've figured out about God, he can take just about anything. You know, and when you're being honest with God and just saying, this is where I am, God knows that. And I know that I've used this illustration way too much, but I love it. You know what I love about God? Is you know you're going to lose, but it feels so good. It's hard to play cards with somebody that holds the whole deck. You know? And yet he lets us vent. And yet at the end of it, it hurts so good. Because you were obedient. Number 4 is this. You are quiet. Are you thinking about where you're going to dinner or a movie or what? Number 4. He focused upon others even during his suffering. Verses 40 and 41. Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. Could you not keep watch with me for 1 hour? He asked Peter, watch and pray that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the body is weak. Now notice this. Here's Jesus, and he's in this intense moment of suffering. Now remember this. Just before he gets here, he tells Peter, because Peter says, Lord, I will even die for you. And he says, Peter, let me tell you who you really are. Before the cock crows tonight, 3 times you will deny me, or before the cock crows, you'll deny me 3 times. Peter said, not me. And so here's Jesus coming back to him. He's in this intense moment of suffering, and he turns away from that, and he looks at Peter, and he says, I want to make your life better. Now, I don't know about you, friends, but when somebody is going through something and it's really difficult in their life, and yet they're able to put it aside and focus on what God's called them to do to better somebody else's life, that is very attractive to me. As a matter of fact, when our oldest daughter was born, and Cheryl had gone through quite an ordeal to bring little Wendy into this world, I remember walking down St. Mary's, the hall, after the whole thing. And let me tell you, friends, I know it's much more difficult on you women. I love what Carol Burnett says. She said, you guys think it has tough. The only way that you can compare childbirth, you men can understand it, is take your bottom lip and pull it over your head. This is a tough crowd. All right. But anyhow, I was walking down that corridor, and then it just hit me. My God, that's what my mother went through. Anna, revelation. Absolute revelation. And just thinking, wow. Now, here's the thing that I want you to think about. My mom, while I was growing up, did not sit me down and say, now I want to tell you, every time I was bad, what it cost me to bring you into this world. She didn't do that. You know why? Hopefully, anyway. Isn't it, Mom? It was for joy. See, and there is something about Jesus. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. I think that's one of the reasons why Paul says it's not wise to have unbelievers take of the Lord's table, because they don't understand the sacrifice. But you see, afterwards, when you realize of what and then he's not lording it over or you're beating it over your head. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons, friends, we take communion, let me give you 2 reasons why we take communion. Number 1 is this, is to know that, first of all, Jesus is saying, it was my joy. It was my absolute joy to suffer for you. And we don't get the full impact of that thing until we recognize, just like I was on that moment having that revelation, wow, that's what my mom went through? I mean, that's what you went through for me? It's just like this, this thing where Jesus is going, I don't want to beat you up with this thing, but when you come, I want you to remember me. And the second thing is this, remember that it's finished. It's finished. It's completely done. Our salvation is completely paid for. And it was a huge price. But he says, when you come at the table, you drink and eat of the bread, remember this, it was my joy. See? And that's what most parents in this room would say. Whatever sacrifices there were to bring our kids into the world and to have them, it was for joy. It was for joy. It's the same thing with the Lord. Number 5 is this. His victory was first and foremost on the internal level. His victory was first and foremost on the internal level. Verses 45 and 46. Then he returned to his disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour is near, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Go, here comes my betrayer." Now, here's, I'm meditating on that this week, and I'm thinking about it. I said, when you get to these two scriptures, there is a total atmosphere change in the Lord's life. From darkness until peaceful light. And see, and here's the point. At some point on that third time when he went back to his heavenly Father, whatever was accomplished in that moment gave him the peace to go through what he was going through. Now, I think this to be very true. The victory on the cross would never have been accomplished if, first of all, there wasn't a victory in Gethsemane. There would have never been the victory on the cross if there wasn't, first of all, Gethsemane. Years ago, I had a pastor in this town dying of Hodgkin's disease, and he gave a sermon. And I mean to tell you guys, I'm not serving God at this time. And he gave a sermon, and it was, have you had your Gethsemane? Have you come to that place of just total surrender? And he was telling us his congregants, he was going, "I'm not going to make it. It's going to be okay." And you know why it's going to be okay? Because I had my Gethsemane. Gone to that place where it said it's okay. I can go through this. I just love football. Sometimes I wished I would have been a coach. And then I realized I am. It's just a different playing field. And I love to hear coaches. I love to be around coaches. I know their world. And most coaches will tell you that the game is either won or lost before it ever gets onto the field by the players. And I'm telling you that when Jesus stands up, and worship team, you can come on up. When Jesus stands up and goes, "Here comes my betrayer." And notice this, friends. When you have gained victory in your life, whatever the issue might be, you face it head on. Let's go. And there's just something about that result. I can follow a leader like that. I can follow somebody like that just says, "Let's go." The issue has been settled. And friends, some of us tonight just need to settle the issue. We just need to settle the issue. I'm going to follow Jesus. He's attracted me. I can't get away from the essence of his personality. I want to follow Jesus. And it's not just because somebody has said some things to you. It's just because that person has captivated your heart. And let me just say this. There's a certain amount of peace that you find in the Lord's life, even though he's going to go through incredible amounts of suffering, because he settled the issue. Settle the issue. Settle the issue. Allow that strength of character to become your strength of character, because what he did, he says, "I modeled it for you." Whatever you're going through, I went through something bigger. And I'm with you. And I can take you through this. I want you to stand. And as we stand and worship the Lord together, I want you just to be obedient. And I know I say that every week, but I really want you to be obedient. What's the issue that needs to be settled? His strength of character is here to help you grapple with this. Let's worship the Lord.